This is the crystal structure of arsenium, the very first pharmaceutical, you could say, arguably the birth of pharmaceuticals, discovered 111 years ago, 1907. It's the first antibiotic, 21 years before penicillin. And this is essentially demonstrating to you that pharmaceuticals are, in a way, old technology. They have dominated healthcare for the past 100 years, but like most old technologies, they are wrought with problems. And there are four major problems with pharmaceuticals. One is that they are difficult to personalize. Essentially, it's one disease, one molecule. You may have one disease in a few molecules, but essentially each person gets the same thing depending on what disease from which they suffer. Another thing is that they are often accompanied by unacceptable side effects. For example, the treatment that I get for my eyes to deal with my photophobia actually impairs my vision more than the underlying cause of my eye condition. It impairs my vision even more than these sunglasses. And yet it's something that I take because it should lead to a cure in the end. The third thing that pharmaceuticals don't do well is prevent disease. We are trained now to go to the hospital once we've gotten sick, to expect a prescription, to get a drug and then get better. Whereas I think most of you, and certainly myself, would rather not get sick to begin with. The pharmaceuticals don't really push us in that direction. And the fourth major problem is that pharmaceuticals often don't reach many big diseases or big disease populations. One good example of diseases that pharmaceuticals are not good at addressing is addiction. The people are addicted to a drug and it has not been successful by trying to treat an addiction to a drug with another drug. Pharmaceuticals are just not good at this disease category. In addition, because small molecules typically require refrigeration and transport, there are huge areas of the world that are unable to access pharmaceuticals, unable to access what is arguably the most important part of healthcare that exists today. And so I believe that the solution is digital. And it's digital because of how digital therapeutics, digiceuticals, digital health, how this addresses the problems of pharmaceuticals. One is that they are inherently personalized, or at least much more easy to personalize, because they rely on data that they're collecting in real time of the specific user. The second thing is that they have far fewer side effects, if any side effects at all. And a lot of this is due to the personalization and also by how they actually work. The third solution is the fact that digiceuticals are primarily focused on prevention. They're continually monitoring what's happening in your body, what's happening in your mind, and then notifying you of the potential to have a disease before it occurs and introducing an intervention before you even get sick, which arguably is a much more convenient way for us to address healthcare and also turns out to be much more cost effective. And then of course, reason number 4 is that there are some disease categories, like addiction for example, that are actually treated quite well with digiceuticals and will be treated better and better over time with digiceuticals as compared to pharmaceuticals. And once we have a global network of satellites and universal access to high-speed internet, digiceuticals will be able to reach people from all over the globe, in the furthest corners. It's more likely for somebody in Western Somalia to have a smartphone than a fridge. Digiceuticals cost virtually nothing to transport to that individual. But the main reason, the main driving force behind the power of digiceuticals and why there will be such a big revolution is our increased understanding of the mind and its relationship to the body. Neuroscience is making some incredible progress every single year. And this is really what allows us to make use of digiceuticals. To demonstrate this, I want to ask you a question. What is a thought? I'm not trying to be philosophical. I'm really asking you, what is actually a thought? What is that? What is it? Ponder on that for a minute. Or maybe ask yourself, what is your mind? What is this organ that's between your ears? And you combine these questions together, and you can ask, what does your mind do when you're thinking? What is going on in your head while you are thinking? What is actually happening? And increasingly we are knowing more and more about this. And this is a really powerful thing for digital therapeutics. There are two main things that really happen in terms of a thought, what a thought is, what your brain does when you're thinking. The first is electrical activity. So your neurons communicate by passing electrical pulses between each other. You have 100 billion neurons in your brain, thousands of connections for each neuron, trillions of synapses. And they maintain this electrical activity that corresponds to your thoughts and corresponds to the activity that your brain is undergoing in any period of time. This is a real-time fMRI image of somebody just sitting and thinking. And there are waves of activity that pass through their brain that corresponds to their thoughts, corresponds to their feelings, corresponds to whatever memory might be replayed in their head, corresponds to how their brain is taking care of their bodily functions. And this can be leveraged in quite dramatic and powerful ways. For example, after identifying the subnucleus of the hypothalamus that gives rise to feeding behavior, researchers have been able to stimulate this subcortical nuclei in order to induce feeding behavior. Turn feeding on and turn feeding off. There's a direct correlation between the activity of a certain area of the brain and behavior. This is how we harness our understanding of the circuits that underlie our thoughts and our emotions, our desires. The second main way that your brain maintains your thoughts is through molecular changes. In this animation, the red cartoons are dopamine neurons. And it's just showing the transmission of dopamine across the synapse, binding to dopamine receptors. And this is a molecular change that typically takes place when you have a prediction of an award. And the degree of this can correspond to how salient that reward will be. And the amount of postsynaptic receptors that are present there corresponds to your brain state. During my PhD at Mount Sinai Hospital, my colleagues and I found that by increasing the level of a protein called neuronal calcium sensor 1 in the hippocampus, this is a protein that's in all mammals, it's naturally present in your mind, that by increasing the levels in the hippocampus in adult mice, we were able to increase the speed at which neurons could change the strength of their ability to communicate with one another. And this corresponded in increasing the ability for mice to learn. So essentially, they became smarter for certain types of learning. And we also found that they became more curious, more inquisitive, particularly when they were put into new environments that they deemed to be safe. And this expression of curiosity, we then understood, was due to an increase in dopamine receptors in this area of the brain, the hippocampus. And then we went on to find that just the act of becoming curious and beginning to explore induces this molecular change naturally. So now we have a way to understand how a specific behavior corresponds to a molecular change in the brain. And it's this type of increased understanding that is driving us at Mobio Interactive. Because we see this coming. We see this increased ability to leverage neuroscience in order to give people therapies that come in a digital means. And we're starting with a very specific prediction. And that's that pain, mood, and anxiety disorders will primarily be treated with digitally delivered mindfulness. Mindfulness is a specific form of meditation. That's all it is, it's nothing fancy. But it's been developed by neuroscientists and physicians. And it has been shown to increase creativity, increase focus, to build stress resilience, to speed healing, prevent disease. It's associated with changes in the structure and the function of your brain, particularly strengthening the function of your prefrontal cortex and the connection from your prefrontal cortex to subcortical nuclei. Subcortical nuclei that typically respond to fear, to anxiety. So by training people in mindfulness, you can alleviate a lot of the symptoms associated with mood and affect disorders. And there's also the ability to treat pain. Because pain in your body is primarily mediated by the ACC, anterior cingulate cortex, and the ability for mindfulness to increase suppression of the ACC has also been discovered. There have been hundreds of studies completed already, and in many cases, mindfulness outperforms pharmaceuticals with essentially no side effects. But it's an expensive type of treatment. It actually costs a lot of money to train people in mindfulness, medical grade mindfulness. So what we've done at Mobio Interactive is devise a way to quantify the effectiveness of mindfulness training. We could essentially quantify the effectiveness of anything, but in this case we're applying it to mindfulness training. And we do this in a remote and an objective way so that it scales. We use a device camera to record breath rate, heart rate, and relative blood oxygen saturation. From heart rate, we can get heart rate variability, which is inversely correlated with stress. We feed all this data into a deep learning network, and then we predict somebody's stress level. And we have deep neural networks that are able to predict stress now with over 90% accuracy. And so by embedding this inside of an app that trains people in mindfulness, all we need is a pre-measurement and a post-measurement for each mindfulness session. And then we're able to understand how each individual mindfulness session affected that specific user at that specific time, and then curate a personalized program so that we have the most effective mindfulness training program that exists, and at a fraction of the cost of delivering it with live training sessions. We've already shown through a random controlled trial at the University of Toronto that we can increase the stress resilience of students with mild anxiety during exam season after just 3 weeks of using the app. And this is done against active control, which is the most rigorous way of doing a random controlled trial. The second random controlled trial we've already completed examined physical endurance. We find a 4% increase in physical endurance. Now, mindfulness clearly isn't increasing the muscle mass of these athletes. But what it is doing is increasing their focus. And it's also increasing their relationship to strenuous activity. One of the most exciting findings from this study is that they have a positive affect in relation to strenuous activity after mindfulness training, whereas the control group continued to have a negative affect in relationship to strenuous activity. And the most exciting finding for me are data that come from within the app itself. So the app is continually monitoring people's stress level, both in an objective way through the camera and also according to people's inputs. And what we find is we look across meditations over time, that we see a reduction in the baseline level of people's stress and an increase in the baseline mood that people express when they come into the app in order to meditate. And these long-term benefits persist over time. But it's really just the beginning. When I was starting random controlled trials to specifically look at pain, and not just with apps, but using virtual reality, we're beginning a research trial to examine severe mental health. These are patients that do not respond to any type of pharmaceutical that's available, patients that have to go to the hospital and stay there because they're unable to function in normal society, to see if we have a way to deal with them. We're looking at cancer patients, not just in recovery, but also in the prognosis. So delivering digital therapeutics to cancer patients when they are admitted to hospital to see if it has an effect on tumor regenesis. We really want to do a study on postpartum depression here in China. We're launching a new product specifically for that. Postpartum in China is double the incidence that it is in Western countries. And we really think that we can do something to address it here in an extremely cost-effective way, in a way that scales. We'd like to integrate with smart cities in the future in order to get a macro understanding of well-being in response to large infrastructure changes in the city or policy decisions that are made by the government. And then in the years and decades to come, we want to start using digital therapeutics to target things like neurodegeneration, diabetes, any other type of disorder that you might think of. Addiction is an easy one, sensory loss, paralysis. We don't know where this is really going to go, but we do know where it's starting. Today, you can think of us as a pill-popping species. This is the primary way that we think of healthcare, including myself. This is just how it is. This is the way it works. But tomorrow, the situation will be quite different. I would predict that somebody in this room in about 20 years will wake up and they'll go down to their breakfast table, they'll have some tea, and then they'll get a message from their smartphone. And it will say, good news. You have been identified as a likely person to develop Parkinsonian, but we know how to prevent it. And then you'll have a car come to your door, a remotely controlled car come to your door, and you'll be transported off to a health center, a hospital. And in this hospital, you will sit and you will get a brain scan that monitors electrical activity and to some degree, also the molecular changes in your brain. And at this moment, you'll be given a variety of different stimuli, tactile, visual, audio, and asked to actually do actions. And all of these stimuli will then be matched for responses in your brain. And in the case of Parkinsonian, it might just be as simple as repeating stimuli that increase dopamine levels in your basal ganglia. Or this has been shown to work for deep brain stimulation already. And this could be a preventative thing, I don't know. But something like this is going to happen to somebody here in the next 20 years. We have a really great team of people at Mobio Interactive. I particularly want to thank my co-founder, Mark Thoburn, who's a true visionary and an excellent designer. And I want to leave you with a little bit of a take-home message. As much as advancements in neuroscience and digital technology are driving this revolution in healthcare, when you really boil down to the core of what's happening here, is we're teaching ourselves the ability to heal ourselves. This is really what's going on. And I don't mean this in some sort of fantastic way. And as a scientist, it almost makes me cringe to say something like that we can become independent from molecules. But largely, this is actually what's happening, is we're leveraging technology in order to use the power that we already have to take care of our own health. And this will be driven forward primarily by you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Thank you very much.